Tau Vande Bhagavantau Punaha Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagini Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Om Shanti 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 Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Tat Sat. So we have finished the sloka, the last sloka. I'm now sharing the screen to bring it on. We had finished the sloka number here in these online thing. This is sloka number 10th. Vairagyam Shantir Oradyam Vairagyam Shantir Audaryam Ityadyaha Sattva Sambhavaha. So the three qualities of detachment and ability to forgive or forgiveness, Shanti, and Udara, a certain amount of compassionate open-mindedness, Ityadyaha Sattva Sambhavaha. These are the innate qualities of us, actually, because by nature our inner core is Sattvika. It is Prakasha and Jnanatmaka. This is our inner nature. So these things should come to us naturally. Because why? If you look at the next two lines of the sloka, Kama Kodho Lobha Yatna Vityadya Rajaso Thita. So they emerge out of the Rajasic modification of our consciousness. When the Rajasic force gains control of our consciousness, then you have Kama and Krodha, craving, anger, then greedy feelings, and then you want to preserve. Yatno Ityadya Rajaso Thita. And then you have tamasic modification of the consciousness. Alasya Bhrantri Tandradya Vikaras Tamoso Thita. The three, Alasya, laziness, delusional, mistaken, opinionatedness kind of your consciousness. You are sticking into something, you're clinging onto something, and then sleepiness, laziness, and drowsiness. These are the qualities which sort of fructify and become evident in our character when we are overpowered by the tamasic disposition of our consciousness, of the mind. That we have to keep in mind. So that is how the mind functions. Therefore, now let's look at the next verse. We had finished this much. Then the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic dispositions, or these gunas, these are not qualities in the Nyaya sense. These are not like qualities like color or weight or specific gravity. No. These are three gunas, means three dispositions. Sattvikeir punya nispattihi papotpattischa rajasaihi tamasenu bhayam kintu vrithayuh kshapanam bhavet atra Aham pratyayi kartre tyevam lokavyavastitihi. Now, what kind of actions do we undertake? What kind of things do we do when we are under the spell of sattvic energy? That is our swabhava. That is our natural inclination of the self. When we have energies which are sattvic by nature, punya nispatihi, you are more likely to be compassionate, show kindness to others, be good to others, smile and speak to others, show warmth and love and compassion. That is what we are. That is our Swarupa. Punya nispattihi. And these will give you loads of punya. These are virtues of piety and compassion and kindness and stuff like that. Then you know that fellow is a very sattvika person. How do we say that? When we come across a person, you are in stress, he is not supposed to help you. He goes out of his way to pull you out of a very difficult situation, out of sheer compassion. He's a suhrid. He doesn't expect anything in return. How do you make sense of it? You say he must be a very good man, a sattvic person. And Papotpattischa rajasehi. Why papa out of rajas? Because see, when you have that stressful energy in you, which drives you towards achieving something, you are not oriented towards punya. You are oriented towards self-aggrandizement. You want to, you are more accusative. You want to acquire things. You want to control over. You want to control others. You want to make use of others' labor and intelligence and everything to your benefit. And you are under the spell of the rajasic energy. If you are sattvic, rajas is good. Some rajasic energy anyway is necessary for the very survival of the human species, or any animal, any bird, any plant. They all have some rajasic energy. There is nothing which doesn't have all three energies in there. When I say sattvic, I'm only talking about a proportional domination or overwhelming presence of sattvic energy. Doesn't mean of the three or the two energies are completely absent. That is not possible. So other things are there, other two elements or dispositions or energies are there, but in lower percentages. And so when I say rajasic, that means that is what overwhelms you, dominates you. Then papa utpattihi, you sin. No, not in that sense. You do a lot of activities, much of which is not going to elevate your consciousness towards either liberation or towards Swarga. It's essentially because of Rajasic. Even if you go to Swarga, because you're going because of your Rajasic energy, you will be there for a while, that's fine. But you're going to come back and you will have load of, the accumulated karmas where there'll be a lot of negativities. You may have hurt a lot of people. In the process of attaining success, we do not know how much harm we may have caused to others. We may have been indifferent. We may have been very selfish. Therefore, he's saying, Papa utpattischa rajasehi. What about tamas? That indolence, that laziness. Tamas said, no ubhayam kintu. Neither you get papa nor punya. What do you get? Bruthayuhu khyapanam bhaved. The lazy guy is lying on the bed. Is neither good nor bad. The Shastrakar is mocking at him. He's saying, this is the guy who would be lying on his bed, waiting for a free lunch, a call from the mother or sister, come have lunch. He's happy. He's a burden on others. Of course, he has some papa, but he may not necessarily be cruel to anybody. He may have a very warm demeanor. He may be a very well-mannered person, but he is essentially wasting his life. That is what he's trying to say. Let's look at how the commentators have written about it. Let's first go to the So sattvikai punya nispati. Sattvika gunehi punya nispati bhavati. You decide that you want to do some punya karma, and rajaso gunaha papasya utpatihi. It is the causal factor. Tamasa gunehi na ubhayamapi. However, we are lazy, you are not doing anything. Kintu brutha ayuhu khyapanam bhavati. Atra asmin shloke aham pratyay jivaha karta iti eva loka vyavastitihi. You look at this particular sentence when he says aham pratyay karta ityevam. Aham pratyay. Who is karta? The person who has that particular state of mind where he says, I am the one who is doing everything. I should get credit. I deserve attention. I deserve applause. I hope you are being reminded of some great statesman who has been looking for the Nobel Prize in last several weeks. Unfortunately, he didn't get it. But then, somebody says, I deserve the Nobel Prize. I deserve a lot of attention. A lot of politicians, we should not single out anyone. A lot of politicians, a lot of leaders, all the time they're fishing for public attention. They want to appear larger than life. Aham pratyay karta ityevam loka vyavastitihi. The moment you have a strong aham pratyaya, and then you have the predicate where you bring in all the things you imagine you have done or actually are doing, that is the jiva. That is the jiva, and he is abaddha by his own karma. He's chained by his own activities because he has to enjoy good and bad outcomes of all his activities. Karta ityevam loka vyavastitihi. Then he's saying, you look at the rajas, sattva, and tamas. Okay, when they are getting activated, and then you are there as a karta, then you get the benefits either sattvic activities or rajasic activities or tamasic activities. But what is central to all the interplay of these energies is your kartutva bhava. If you don't have kartutva bhava, you become slowly gunatita. You transcend these limitations. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, for example, Sattam Sukha Sangena Vadnati Jnana Sangena Sanagha Rajo Ragatmakam Piddhi Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam. Right? So if you look at the Rajasic thing, Ragatmakam, Rajyate Anenaiti Ragaha, it colors your consciousness. It tempers your consciousness with a certain desire, certain inclination, certain affiliation. There's some kind of a movement in you. I want to have it. I should be owning it. And there is movement. You call it progress, fine. But that's how it works. You're always a little restless. You're trying to achieve something. You said, I'm at X, I want to be X plus 1 or X plus 2 or X plus C, whatever. And Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam. And then in the Trishna Asanga, where there's craving and there is attachment. Right? Tamastatva Jnanam Piddhi. And where from these indolence and everything? Because of Ajnana. You don't even know who you are. You're in a state of that solitude of, eternal solitude of ignorance and indolence. You are lying there. Mohanam Sarvadehinam. It deludes us. And therefore, he's saying, where do these gunas manufacture effects? In our minds. Manaiva Manushyanam Karanam Bandha Mukhyayoho. Both, whether Bandha and Mukhya, it's the mind which is at the root of it. That's what Buddhism says. You fix the mind, don't look for God. If you fix the mind, you can fix everything, because that is the root cause of all our bad and good experiences we have in life. And therefore he's saying, all these things that are happening, the jiva, with his identification that I am the doer, he gets results thereof. So the sattva guna there is something that we should be aspiring to have. Why? Because he is saying it is Suddha Prakasha Rupa. It's oriented towards light, Prakasha and Jnana Rupa. Right? And therefore, because it has that sunshine quality, it lights up the consciousness. And therefore, you are oriented towards noble acts, noble thoughts, punya nispatihi. Sattva sanjayate jnanam. That's what Bhagavan says in this sloka number 17 in the 14th chapter. Whereas if you look at the rajoguna or the rajasiya guna, rajoguna karma pradhanaha, all the time is focused on activities. Kya karna hai kya? What next kind of an orientation. And then it is a little tainted with raga and dvesha. What you don't like, you have dvesha. What will not give you profit, you have dvesha. What's going to give you some profit or some benefit, you feel elated. Okay, so that is what is the cause of papa. Papa means whatever is not punya is papa. Even if you get money and all, for what? Because that has a binding consequence for you. Therefore, Bhagavan says, Rajastu karma sangam viddhi. Therefore, it binds you with different kind of activities. Fir chhod nahi sakte. You cannot leave it behind. And then, what about tamoguna? Ajnana mulaka. At the root of it is an ignorance you're capable of, and what is your swarupa. And then you look at the people who are either having substance abuse or they are overtaken by some kind of a mental depression or anything. That is all depression, addiction, avarice, or strong irritation. All these are negative, and irritability. All these are a mixture of tamas and rajas, depending on what sort of a person you are. You're a highly rajasic person. Under depression, you can turn very violent. So this is how it sort of works. And therefore, he's saying, if you look at these indriyas, the senses we have, Paranchikhani vetrinat swayambhuhu tasmat parang pashyati na antaratman kaschid dhiraha pratyagan pratyagatman ayhyad avrita chakshuhu amritatvam ichhana. Only a very few number of people you want to go beyond the sattva, rajas, and tamas, and you want to look inwards. Aprita chakyu, not by closing eyes physically, but by withdrawing attention from the external world towards the inner self. Aprita chakshu, essentially a kind of a withdrawal from activities of the indriyas in order to meditate on the self. Where you don't need eyes, you don't need mind. These are at the beginning stage. You need to abandon the functioning of all that, because tadrashtuhu swarupe avasthanam, that is the ultimate stage. So you are going inward. Therefore, what happens is that when you become sattvika, there is a kind of expansion of the viveka sakti, the ability to analyze and know what is going to benefit you. You become inwardly oriented. On the other hand, if you are rajasika, you become a little more interested in activities which are going to give you tangible results. If you are tamasic, oh, fine, you're going to lie down and relax and kill your time. Okay, and therefore, in all this, end of the day, essentially, jiva is the karta. This is the loka vyavastitihi. Okay, and if we go to the next loka, what it says. Spasta sabdadi yukteshu bhautikatva sputam akshadavapi tat sastra yukti bhyam avadharyatam. Now, bhautikatva, nature of these panchabhutas and the prakriti and jagat, these are all, these are the panchagrata panchamahabhuta. They have manifested as this material reality around us. Vishayas, that means objects of sense perception. What are the objects of sense perception? Smell is the object of the ghanendriya. Taste is the object of these rasanendriya. Our tongue, the ability to taste. Rupa, beauty, color, everything. That is the object of our sense perception. Which sense organ is this? The eyes. Sound of the ear, shravanendriya. Right? So these five vishayas, objects of our sense organs or sense perception, these are bhutatmaka, bhautika by nature, because they are all panchagrita, panchamahabhuta karya. These are the outcomes of this. What about the indriyas? The indriyas are also bhautika, and that we have discussed earlier, because out of the akasa, the sattvic angsha, we have the shravanendriya. Out of the sukshma bhuta, which is the sparshendriya, sukshma bhuta vayu, out of which you have the sparshendriya, right? Sparshanendriya, we ability to touch and feel. Similarly, out of the agni tattva, sukshma bhuta agni, we have the darshanendriya, the ability to see. And similarly, the rasanendriya comes out of water, sukshma, not the physical water. And finally, the ghanendriya, the ability to smell, comes out of the sukshma prithvi tattva. So these indriyas are also bhautika, though we cannot see them. All the indriyas are atindriya. We cannot see our ability to see, our ability to smell, our ability to hear. There is no sense organ through which you can apprehend and ascertain the presence of the ability to hear, the ability to see. You can do anumana. Because I can see this computer screen, it's evident that I am able to see. How do we have this image being processed in my mind? Because I cannot process a certain image without the benefit of some sense organ. That is how you can conclude, right? You can do logical conclusion, but you cannot prove through pratyaksha. You cannot have sense perception of your sense organs. That we have discussed earlier. That is what is now being explained, this particular shloka, number 12 here. Spasta savdadi yukteshu bhautikatvam atishputam. So all these five Visayas, it's evident. There's no argument to be made. It's directly perceivable to the naked eyes, to the senses we have. Similarly, akshadau api, that means also in our sense organs, akshadau api. Adi means first eye, but you can include all of the four sense organs. Api tastra yukti bhyam avadharyatam. Astra and Yukti. First, look at what the Upanishads or the Vedas say about the sense organs. The Vedas also mention that the sense organs we have are works of Sukshma Bhuta. That's the Shastra, Yukti Bhyam. And then you also conclude with argumentation. There is something you are able to see. That means you have a Darsanendriya. There is some sound you are being able to hear. Therefore, you have an organ which can hear, with the help of which you can hear. And that is your sense organ relating to sound. And all of it are also bhautika. Why? Something which is not bhautika cannot have any relationship, something which is abhautika. How do you have any physical relationship between them? How can a sense organ connect with something if there is no, what do you call it, no equivalence? There's nothing similar between these two. Therefore, both are bhautika, the Vishaya and the Vishaya Sambandhi Indriya, which accesses it, which apprehends it, which connects with it. Both are the Vishaya and Vishayi. Both the subject, the object of perception, and the organ which perceives, the organ which apprehends. They belong to one category of the, one is the Bahya Bhuta, Panchakrita, Sthula Bhuta, and this is Sukshma Bhuta. This is subtle, that is gross. The subtle bhautika instrument, called a certain sense organ, apprehends the same, of the same category. The ears cannot see, the eyes cannot hear. The eyes are a work of the Agni, Sukshma Agni Tattva, and it can see the Sthula Agni Tattva. Look at the relationship. Without that correlationship, this ability to see will not fructify. Therefore, the sense organ is bhautika. What you see is bhautika. That is Sthula Bhuta, and this is Sukshma Bhuta. It's a work of the Sukshma Bhuta. Okay, that is what is mentioning. Let's look at the commentary where it's elaborated a little further. Savda sparsha rupa rasa gandhanam idam bhautikatvam sarve pratakshena eva anubhavamaho. We can know it through prataksha, direct sense perception. You see that this is the color, this is the earth material, this is sound, right? This is air, I can feel it. And then he's saying that you look at the Shastra and then you look at the Yukti to infer that the sense organs are also work of the Sukshma Bhuta, therefore Bhautika. Indriyani Bhautikani. The Indriyas also made of that Bhautika Tattva. Yadyapi Indriyani Sukshmatvena na drishyate. You cannot see the Indriyas because they are Sukshma. Tathapi tesam karyeshu padartha paryantatvad bhautikatvam nishansayam. Because they are connecting these Indriyas with the subject matter, the Vishayas. Therefore, no doubt, they are also bhautika by nature. And how are they made? Because we know out of the Panchatana Matras, the Sattvic anshas, the Gyanendriyas, out of the Rajasic anshas, you have the Karmendriyas, they have fructified. Edesang Panchatanmatra Matrikanam Prithivyadiram Sanghatanam Sariram Cha Indriyani Cha. This is the Taittiriya Upanishad, which says 2.1. Out of these 5 Tanamatras, means 5 Sukshma Bhutas, these Indriyas have emerged out of that. This is Shruti. He said Shruti Yukti Bhyam. So now we are quoting Shastra. Then we'll quote the argument part, the logical part. So Indriyana bhai Panchabhutikatvam Siddham. So obviously as per Shastra, we can infer that they are also. And then Yukti Bhyam Cha. And what is the Yukti here? He's saying Yuktyahi Jnayate Yat Indriyani Yadi Bhautikaihi Vishayihi Sanyam Kurvanti Tari Esam swarupam bhautikam eva syat. Look at these organs. They are connecting with the bhautika padarthas. And they cannot belong to another category. Of course, it's not the best argument to give, but he's saying that it's possible for us to infer that there is some kind of a correlationship. And in fact, if you look at the Vedanta Sara of Sadananda, he also writes the same thing there. Tanmatrebhya panchabhya sukshma bhutebhya panchamahabhutani. You see? So first you have Panchagrita, Panchamahabhuta becomes the Sthula Bhuta, the gross material objects that we see. And out of the Sukshma Bhutas, the Panchatanmatras, you have the sense organs that have emerged. Right? So when you have the Vishayeshu Bhautikatvam Pratyakhyam, it's evident. There is no argumentation required. However, if you look at this Sabda, okay? If you look at Sabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Gandha, right? These are the 5 Vishayas. The Vishayas of these sense organs. These are the Tanmatras in the beginning. So, if you have Sabda, this is coming out of the Akasa Tattva. And Sparsha, Vayugunaha, Rupaha, Tejasaha, Rasaha, Apaha, Gandha, Prithibhyaha. These are the qualities of this Panchabhuta earlier. And therefore, he's saying, Savdadeha Vishayaha Drishyante Bhautikatvam Ati Spashtam Idanim Akhyado api tat Indriyeshu api Sotradishu Bhautikatvam Tathapi Sastra Yuktibhyam. So therefore, he's trying to argue that this also we can argue have this particular thing. Okay? So you have Shruti Pramana and then a bit of elaboration with logical explanations. First, you have the different Upanishads where they are clearly mentioning, okay? Tad angsesu, tad indriyam, esam sarge vyavastitihi. It is mentioned there in Vedanta Sara. So you have the Akasa Tattva, out of which you have the Shravanendriya. You have the Agni Tattva, Sukshma Panchabhuta. Agni Tattva, Agni Tanmatra, out of which you have the Darshanendriya. And you have the Prithvi Sukshma Bhuta, Tanmatra, out of which you have the Granendriya. That is how he's trying to say that these have emerged out of this. The Ramakrishna ji sort of elaborates it like this. Spasta savdadi yukteshu spastehi sabda sparshadi gunehi sahiteshu ghatadishu vastushu bhutakaryatvam spastam eva abagamyate. If you look at a ghada, a pot made of earth, it's made of earth, clay. So it's bhautika. It's a bhutakarya. It's an outcome of some kind of a bhautika vastu. Nothing to argue. We can directly see it. Indriyadishu katham bhutakaryatva nishchaya ityasankhya agam anumanabhyam ityaha akhyado apiti. If somebody has a doubt how the sense organs are also bhautika by nature, because you can't see them, they're too subtle, he's saying, no, they very much bhautika. You look at agama and you look at yukti. Annamayam hi somya mana apamayoho pranastejomayi vak. This is the Shruti Pramana. Annamayam hi somya mana. The mind, he was not given food to eat and therefore he could not think. That depends on what you are eating. Your mind will, you take a lot of spicy food and stuff like that. You may have acidity. You are more likely to be excitable and stuff like that. If you don't believe me, take some chemicals or take some alcohol and you see how the mind behaves. Annamayam hi somya manaha apamayaha pranaha. You see, the prana shakti is born out of that water tattva. Tejomayi vak. And therefore they used to drink a lot of ghee. Because Tejomayi vak, the ability that, he's saying that he's a very eloquent speaker, fiery speaker, he spoke very well, right? Tejomayi vak. This is Chandogya Upanishad 654 sloka number. Ityadi Shastram Anumanam cha Vimatani Sotradini Bhutakaryani Bhavitum Aranti. This is the logical argument, syllogism from Nyaya he's giving. Vimatani Sotradini Bhutakaryani. These Sotra and Shravanendriya and Darshanendriya and Granendriya, Rasanendriya, these are Bhutakaryas. They deserve to be Bhutakaryas. How? Bhuta anya vetireka anuvidhaitvat. This is the logical proof he is giving. What is anvaya vetirike? Tasattve tatsatvam, tadavave tadavavaha. Like for example, how mrit sattve ghada sattvam. If there is clay, you can have a ghada, you can have a pot. If there is no clay, can you have a pot? No. Therefore, pot is a work of clay. Similarly, he's saying, wherever you have these sukshma bhutas, then only can you have these indriyas. Without these sukshma bhutas, these indriyas will not be possible. यद यद अन्य व्यतिरेक अनुविधायी तत्तत् कार्यम दृष्टम यथा मृत अन्य व्यतिरेक अनुविधायी घटो मृत कार्यो दृष्टः. The way because of clay there is a ghata. Similarly, imani tasma tatha tatha cha imani indriyani. These five sense organs similarly are outcomes of these sukshma bhutas. He gives in one sentence. Tad anvaya vitireka anuvidhayitvam cha षोडशकलः सौम्य पुरुषः. The Chandogya Upanishad says षोडशकलः सौम्य पुरुषः इत्यादिना छांद्यग श्रुतो मनसः श्रुतं tad vad अन्यत्रापि द्रष्टव्यम. So that is how he's saying this mind is one of these antakarana. That is also it's out of all these sense organs that we have are essentially works of out of the arna. Depending on what we eat, it's going to decide what kind of thoughts we have, what kind of mind we have. These are all arna works of arna. That means essentially bhuta karyas, even though it's sukshma. Okay. Evam bhutani bhautikani cha vivichya darshayitva prakritam sadeva swamya idamagra asit ityadi dvitiya brahma pratipadikam suti व्याचक्षण तद वाक्यस्थ idam padasya arthamaha. Now we are now graduating to another discussion of the Vedanta. What is this? In the Chandogya Upanishad, we discuss about this prapancha, samsara. They have manifested, and it is diversified. It's not similar. There are different kind of Vedas. You have men and women and animals and birds. You have trees and plants and mountains. It's very colorful, very complex. What was there when all of these had not emerged into manifestation? There is a statement which says, because if somebody can prove that all of these was always like this, like the Mimamsakas believe, the original Karmakanda aspects of Vedas, they don't create any creationism. Do you know this? It's very astounding. They don't accept any creation theory. They believe it was always there. Who is a creator? What Ishvara are you talking about? Gods, goddesses, yeah, there are different energies. That we agree. So you do different kind of Karmakandas, you get your benefits. Is there one Ishvara, unified person who created this universe? They say we have no proof. We don't want to waste our time on that. We know that you have to do Karmakandas, you can get results. You're looking for a mega, macro, cosmological theory. We don't have time to waste on that issue. So they don't get into this subject matter. They stop short of it. So they neither accept nor reject the Ishvara. They don't talk about it. The Nyayikas talk about one Ishvara, and they say multiple Ishvaras are difficult to accept because there'll be a lot of conflict of interest. And then you cannot explain why the world should at all be organized in a certain fashion. If there are multiple gods, it will be very difficult to explain. So they are monists. They think this whole universe is real. It's not a projection like in Advaita Vedanta. It's not Vivartavada. They are realists. They say this is real, like the Vaishnavas. They say this sansar, whatever you see, is real, and there is a creator God. Why? Because nothing happens without a creation, without an agency. So they are like creationists, very much like Christians or Islamists. The Nyayikas also believe in a creator God. The Buddhists don't. The Advaita Vedantis also don't. They say this creation story we are also hearing from the Vedas and the Upanishads. But the creation theory per se is not of interest to us. The creation theory is of interest to us so far as the creation theory gives us a reason to believe that there is a reality beyond creation which is the perfect state of bliss, of knowledge, and of happiness. We want to be there. And that is what doesn't change. And that is the ultimate state of being. The creationism is not something that should blind us to the ultimate truth, but should open our eyes to the ultimate truth. So they've flipped the story upside down, and they take our interest away from creationism to the absolute truth and enlightenment. And that is how we are now going to discuss Sadeva Somya Idamagre Asete Ekam Eva Advitiyam. There is a dialogue between a father and a son, where the father tells the son, Sadeva Somya Idam Agra Asid. Then he says, Asadeva Somya Idam Agra Asid. There was nothing. It was Asad. Then Ekameva Advitiyam. Then he says, Sadeva Somya Idam Agra Asid. Then he explains, what was Avyakrita, what was unmanifest, became manifest. You can never have something out of nothing. If there was something, it was not apparent. Then you see it. When it didn't have any names and forms, it's possible that you try to refer to as Asat. It wasn't there. And then it assumed names and forms. Then you say it was created. But it was always there, and it has to be there. That is called Satkaryavada of the Sankhyas and the Vedanta. You have something out of nothing. There could be a modification. There could be some metamorphosis. Now, that metamorphosis is considered a real metamorphosis according to Sankhya. It is a real modification of Prakriti. But in case of Vedanta, this modification is illusory. It's projectional. There's a certain projection. It is like a stick which inserted in water starts bending. That bent nature of the stick, looked from outside, which is half immersed in water, is a modification which is not real. That is the Vivartavada of Vedanta. We'll get into the details as we progress. Now, let's look at this particular verse, the 18th one. Okay? The 18th one is going to, the 18th in the Ramakrishna Tika book, but here is mentioned Ekadasandriryuktya Sastrinapyavagamyate Yavat Kinched Bhavet Tadidam Sabdoditam Jagat Yavat Kinched Bhavet Etad Idam Sabdoditam Jagat. Why he's talking about 11 senses? We know about it. We have already Ekadasa Indriyaihi Yuktya. Sense organs or organs we have, Ekadasa Indriyas, 5 Karmendriyas, Bakpani Pada Payupastha, and you have the Shravanendriya and Sparshendriya, Darshanendriya, Rasanendriya, and Ghanendriya. 5 Jnanendriyas, 5 Karmendriyas, and Manas. These are the 11 senses we have. Sastrena api avagamyate. You can logically know it, and also through the help of the agamas and what is written in the text. Yavad kinchid bhavet etad idam sabdoditam jagat. Whatever you see all around you, sabdoditam. Look at a very cryptic way of mentioning it. This jagat has emerged out as if in the beginning was the word. That is what is written in the Bible. The same thing is written here as well. The Omkara is both para and apara. So the Veda is Nishwasita by Brahmaji. Everything that you see in this samsara is with name and form. It's a very beautiful metaphor for creation. This creation is not absolutely real. This creation appears real because we ascribe names and forms to it. In a very layman's language, the ocean remains water, then it assumes the name called waves. It becomes waves, nama and rupa, waves, multiple waves. There's a surge in the oceanic bed, right? A storm surge you have. It's all water. But then there is a change in the Nama Rupa. The reality is only descriptive at the level of how we look at it and how we conceptualize it. But if you go beyond these names and forms, the secret which is being mentioned here is that it is that undivided one unified reality. With names and forms, you have this whole prapancha and srishti. That is what is being hinted here. And we will go into the tikas where this will be in great detail. So he's saying, Ekadasendriyevi yuktya sastrenapya avagamyate yavad kinchid bhavet etad idam sabdoditam jaget. Sadeva somya idam agre asite. He's now dealing with the idam part of it. Sad eva, only sad eva. Hey somya, oh my handsome son. Sad eva, my son, my friend, my dear son. Idam, that you see everything. Idam tvena pratibhati, whatever appears as this. Thisness of this whole sansara was only Sat. That unified truth is now this, which is in multiples. Idam. There is saying, Yavat kinchit bhavet etad idam sabdoditam jagat. Idam jagat, sabdoditam. It's emerging out of that word. प्रत्यक्षादिभिः सर्वैः प्रमाणैः अपि शब्दात् अर्थापत्यादि प्रमाण ज्ञानेश्च यावद् किंचित् जगद अवगम्यते तत्सर्वं सद एव. That is Chandogya Upanishad 6:2-1. Look at the beautiful way in which, in a very cryptic way, in a powerful way, too many things are being said in just one sentence. What is he trying to say here? He's saying, Yavad kinchit jagat avagamyate. Whatever you see and you experience as the world, as the material reality around you, tat sarvam, all that, sad eva. Sadeva somya idam, this, agre, in the beginning, was there. This sad eva asit. It was there, not with names and forms, but as only that isness, Sat. It was only there as is. It had no names and forms. Now it has names and forms. Idam sarvam. Sarvam kalu idam brahma. Whatever you see is Brahman. Is names and forms? No. The foundation of all this multifarious, diverse, colorful, difficult to understand, complex reality is that pure consciousness. That is the platform on which this whole sansara is like an appendage. It's like a projection, like the rainbow in the sky. It's just a projection. And that's up. It is not that this is mithya, Brahma Satya Jagana mithya. Jagana is mithya means tuchha. No. The world doesn't exist. No. He never said this. The world is appearing in a way which is not perfectly real. That means what appears is not real. Is there a reality? Yes, there is a reality. We are not denying there's a reality. Otherwise, there will be no difference between what the Vedantists say and what the Sunyavadis, or the Buddhists, the Mula Madhyamika Karika followers say. Of course, there's a lot of similarities. Both talk about two truths, but what they call Shunya, we call Punya, Purna. That is the difference. We are Astikas. We accept there is that perfect consciousness which manifests. That means it assumes names and forms, and we call it the sansara. So he's saying tat sarvam sadeva ityadi vakyasthena idam padena avihitam iti arthaha. What was only sat has become idam, and then it is in multiples. Okay. If you go deeper into it, we're going to get a little more handle to elaborate it. This Jagat Swarupam Vishaykritya vivekam darshayati jagat idam yat pratiyate. Whatever sansara we see, tat na kevalam pratyaksha indriya gocharam kintu ekadasa indriya sambandham jneyam. It's not only seen by you, but it has a relationship with our 11 senses. Ekadasa indriyani nama panchagyanendriyani. You have the 5 karmendriyas, 5 gyanendriyas, and this manas, right? Etebhyah ekadasavihi indrihi yuktya cha sastreni cha. So either with logical explanations or looking at the agamas, jagataha sarvaswarupam pratipadyate yuktya iti. How do you establish logically whatever you see is idam, and they are? How do you know they exist? How do you know this whole material reality exists? Any answers? Yeah, because we have the sense organs. Without sense organs, and what about our microphones, our microscopes and our telescopes? These are extensions of our sense organs. We have expanded the power of our sense organs with the help of these instruments. These are external props for sense organs. But the reality is apprehended by us with the help of our 11 sense organs. We connect with this reality with these sense organs. Okay? And hetu lingabhyam vastutiti ninniyate sastrena iti. And then he's saying, so logically I can prove that there is no reality if you cannot experience them through your senses. And therefore, this whole reality we describe as this, other than I. I can see this. I can smell this. I can hear this. See, there is I and this. This thisness, this whole diverse prapancha obviously exists because I have these 11 sense organs through which I can connect with them. And let's look at the Upanishad then. We have the Anumana, we have the logical conclusion, inference. Now we'll look at whatever is mentioned. He's saying, look here, if you look at even Shastras, that also says the same thing. Whatever you see, yat sarva sabdoditam brahma rupam eva. Sabdoditam means what? They have emerged out of that brahma rupa. Why? He's saying there is a secret to it. Yad brahmana vakya rupena nama rupatmana pratyaksham prapanchitam jagata tadeva sabdoditam. Yad brahmana vakya rupena. You see, this whole sansara, how do you know about it from Shastra? Because the Vedas mention about it. The Vedas mention about it. Where from the Vedas came? For us, the Vedas, it's like the breath of Lord Brahma. They are manifested. Right? Because in the Brahma Sutras, the Sarvajnatva Siddhi of Ishvara is Shastra Yoni Tvat is the Sutra. Because it's the mother of all Shastras. It's the root of all Shastras. And he has to be Sarvajna. Without being a Sarvajna, how does he know about everything? Right? So he's saying, Sabdoditam Jagat Ityatra Gudhartha Yat Brahmana Vakya Rupena Nama Rupatmana Pratyaksham Prapanchitam Jagata, with names and forms, and then available to your sense organs. It comes out of that Sabdoditam. Okay, give me a quotation. He's saying, Asanna eva sa bhavati asad brahma iti veda ched asti brahma iti ched veda santam ena tato vidhu. It's a very powerful statement. The one who knows the Brahman is existing, he has a future. The one who thinks there is no Brahman, he has no future. Why? For him or you or me to have a future, to have any meaningful existence, have any chance of liberation, any chance of enlightenment, there has to be a beginning point. If you are denying the existence of the ultimate truth, where do you hang? Where do you hold all your truths? Because you are denying any foundation. You say that I'm a smart Buddhist, I can manage it. Pratyuta samatpada, dependent arising. They have this theory. When X happens, Y emerges. So it's all mutually dependent cobweb of happenings which appears to be real. Absolutely, there is nothing. Panchaskandatmaka. They have their own theories, ideas about Pudgalavada. There are different kinds of theories are there. They are able to explain that absolutely there is nothing, and yet it all appears as with names and forms. And the Vedanti returns the favor by listening to this beautiful story, saying, "Okay, my dear, who is speaking this? Is there someone who is speaking? You are speaking? You exist? There has to be an observer. Reality is observed. There has to be an observer. And the observer has to exist. You cannot say the observer is also delusional. Then it's like delusion supporting delusion, and there's no witness. Vedanta says there is a universal witness, and that universal witness consciousness is what we refer to. Therefore, he's saying whatever we are seeing here with names and forms is idam, is this, and accessible through our sense organs. However, that is essentially a modification of the Sat, which was there in the beginning. And then it has become like this. And he will explain one by one. Therefore, Brahma eva sat tasmad yad idam drishyate tasya brahmana eva ava avivaktihi. Whatever we see is a manifestation. It has all emanated out of that Brahman. Somya idamagra asit iti sat swarupa brahmanaha prabhritam. Whatever you see, it has emerged out of that sat swarupa. Sabdoditatvam tu brahmanaha Srishti Upakrame Brahma Sutra Bhashye. Bhagavan says, Bhagavad Pada Sankaracharya in 2.1.27 in the Brahma Sutras, he says what? Vachaha prapancha nirmanakatvam. The word is instrumental in this whole creation. Therefore, he's using these words, Sabdoditam. It's a bit of philosophical juggling. You might find it a little overwhelming, but there is a deeper layer of Vedantic secrets which I will not unravel right now, because as we progress, all this will become clearer and clear to us. There's a lot of cosmology behind it. There's a lot of philosophical constructions behind it of Vedantic literature. It's very cryptic. In one word, he mentions Sabdoditam. But to explain that word, we can spend a couple of hours. Okay, so just this much we have to, just listen to, and we'll make progress and move forward. Next sloka. Idam sarvam pura srishtir ekameva dvitiyakam sadevasinnama rupe nastam ityarunir vachaha. You see, he's talking to his son. Okay, Arunir Vachaha is talking to his son, and he's explaining, Idam sarvam pura sristehe prak. Whatever you see, my son, whatever you see, everything. Ekam eva advitiyakam. It was one and without a second. Why do you have to mention both? Because if you say, this is a very logical thing, look at it. If I say, there was nothing, the moment you say there was nothing, the Vedanti starts laughing. It's a very contradictory statement. Why? How can you say nothing was? When you are saying was, you are referring to existence of something. Then you are saying nothing was. There was nothing. They're kind of hitting against each other. When you are saying nothing, why didn't you say there were nothing to be seen? There was nothing to be verified. There was nothing to touch, to feel, to hear. I got no problem. So this reality then wasn't, you couldn't apprehend this reality with your sense organs. Okay, no problem. But there was that truth, that easiness was there. It wasn't visible. It had not manifested as yet. Therefore, he's saying, Idam sarvam sristehe prak. Prior to creation, prior to the story of Srishti kicked in, there was only one reality without a second. Ekam, eva, advitiyakam, ekam asid. Okay, so you're saying eka, what was there? You're saying, there was only one. So there was, okay, there was, but one thing was there, no, that one word was there. So one word plus Brahman, two. No, he's saying ekam eva advitiyam, advitiyakam. That means there's no second. And these words and all we are mentioning just to make sense of it. They did not exist independently at that moment of no creation. It was prior to creation. And then sadeva asit nama rupe na astham. Sadeva asin. And there is this sandhi there. Sadeva asin nama rupe na astham. It was there as sat. However, without any names and forms. Nama rupe na astham. Nama and rupe were not there. It was there. So you met a classmate of yours and she was there when you were in college and we are good friends. Now you meet her, there are two kids, right? And they are addressing her as mom, and she's a very important person for her kids. So you say she was there, the kids were not there. Was she married? Yeah. She had just recently married one of her classmates. Married to my friend. She was there. These kids were not there. Right? Prior to creation, the reality was there. Nama rupe, nama and rupa, na astam. The names and forms were not there. So what kind of reality was this without names and forms? That is why we also refer to it asat. That means it wasn't visible, it wasn't evident to the perceiver. The perceivers were not even there. That was only as sat. Sadi asid nama rupe na asta. There were no names and no forms. Arunir vachaha, quoting from the Chandogya Upanishad. Let's go back to the commentary where this will be further explained in a beautiful way. So he's saying, Arunasya apatyam Arunir Uddalakaha. The son of Aruna is Aruni. And who was he? Uddalakaha. Tasya Bachanam Ityarthaha. This is what is mentioned by Aruni. That is what he is mentioning. And the details, what is he trying to explain to us? Siste, before the creation, Yad idam vishwam dishyate adya. What we see today, tat tada na nama rupatmakam na vikritam nanatva yuktam. It was there before creation, but it didn't have names and form. That means there was no vikara, there was no modification. There was no nanatva yuktatvam. It was not having diversity, multiplicity. These things were absent. Ekam eva advitiyam sat asit. That was the nature of the reality prior to when it became manifest, when it became created. Iti etat Chandogya Upanishad 6:1. And then Aruni Acharya is mentioning it. And what was mentioned there? Sadeva Somya idamagara asit ekam eva advityam. And in that sentence, tatra sat iti sabdaha brahmanaha paramartha swarupam nirdishati. That sat word is explaining that ultimate swarupa of Brahman. Brahman is not Brahmaji. Brahman is that sat swarupa. Yat sarva vikara varjitam nityam swayam siddham jnana rupam satyam jnanam anandam brahma. We are referring that ultimate truth and ultimate reality. Nama rupayoho nastitvam tale yuktam yataha nama rupe dvaita prapanchasya hetuhu tvayo bhave kevalam sateva asita. Whenever you have nama rupa, you have creation. Assumption of nama rupa is what converts the nameless, formless, absolute truthness or truth reality into the multiplicity of the samsara. So these names and forms who are not there. Kevalam Sat Eva. Yatha Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad again says this in 147. Tadeva ekam advitiyam tatra na anyat kinchana mishat. There was nothing else. There was only one. You see, different Upanishads you would find. Sometimes there's a repetition of the ideas and the words may be a little different, or sometimes they're exactly the same. Why so? Well, you have a word called abhyasat in Brahma Sutra. Repeatedly they're being said. So you have to understand that's very important. When Shruti wants to convey one thing, it reiterates by re-emphasizing the importance of that by repeating it in different contexts. And therefore, the Brihadaranyaka also says the same thing. But we have touched the time limit, not an issue. This is a very powerful thing. We'll take it forward when we meet in the next week. So we'll bring it to a close right now, and we'll meet again and we'll look at it again. So let's do the Santi mantras. Om Purnamadaha